Welcome to Black Hat Briefings, held November 21st through the 22nd, 2001 in Amsterdam. This is videotape number 7, Security Issues in the Infrastructure.
The idea of tonight's panel is to chiefly talk about infrastructure issues to businesses. And what we'll hear from each speaker, our panelist, is basically a brief introduction of what they do for a living, to tell you basically why they're qualified to talk about this. And then they'll talk about what they think businesses are doing right and wrong. But since this is a security show, it'll be what everybody's doing basically wrong. And from an infrastructure standpoint, they already own the devices, but are they making intelligent topology decisions? Are they configuring the devices properly? Those types of issues. And then tell you what they see as the quick, cheap fixes. If you already own the devices and it's just a simple question of making the right configuration rule set entry, they'll mention that. And then a year from now, you're probably concerned about your infrastructure now. How about a year from now? What's the threat? What's the cool new threat that people are working on now that we'll see in the wild a year from now? And then we'll pass down the microphone, and then we'll go straight into questions and answers from the audience. And it's really a chance for you to ask a bunch of theoretical what-if questions to the panel, and then you're really sucking the knowledge out of all these guys' brains. So what we get out of the panel is mostly based on the questions you guys answer. And I'll act as the moderator to prevent people from, hogging the microphone or getting stuck for too long on one topic. So I'll try to keep it moving along. And at the end of it, our reward is we get to go down the hallway and have free drinks and food. So yeah, woo! So you're in the home stretch. This is the interactive portion. So with that said, I'm going to pass off the microphone to FX, who gave a great speech, by the way.
Okay, so what I do for a living, I, like most of you, like a poor security consultant, traveling around in Europe and doing like all kinds of security consultancy stuff. Mostly penetration testing. Obviously had some encounters with misconfigured or strange networks, so that's why I came up with this speech. And yeah, to answer the first question about what's commonly done wrong is what I think the default protocols that are existing, since there is an IP protocol stack and everyone is used to them, like the ICMP, ARP, DHCP, everything that's making our lives with the computers so convenient and so easy are, yeah, considered there, and nobody thinks about security implications of them. So this is, if you are in a network, once have like any kind of layer 2 connectivity to a network, let's say you're an inside attacker, which is, as we all know, the most common way of attacks. Yeah, you have easy game and nobody's thinking about it. So I think that's it, and I pass it on.
What's the quick fix?
There is no quick fix.
Hello, I'm Sebastian Lacoste. I'm working for Col Telecom in Switzerland, a telecom operator. So yeah, as expected, I'm doing network design and internet services stuff. I'm also focusing on security for the company in Switzerland, so I'm dealing with all the IT shit and so on. Concerning the business and so on, the one problem I have to live with every day is that, okay, we have nice equipment, software, whatever, delivered by vendors for a very expensive price usually. And they all come with a nice default configurations which help your life, makes your life easier to build up your network or whatever. So it's well known with Microsoft that the default setting allows you to do everything you want. But it's the same case with Cisco devices. When you have all the default setting allow you to do a lot of bad things. And my problem is that all the standard users, operators of those equipment have no clue what are the security problems with those equipments. So basically they will just plug whatever they can on the network, make it work, and after forget it. And I think a big issue we have is the training of the people and security awareness of what are the problems with a different piece of infrastructure. Yeah, whatever. Yeah, that's all. Fix, train the people, and make them think about what they are doing.
Okay. My name is Job de Haas. I manage a company, a small company, doing penetration testing here in Amsterdam. So that's about half of my time. The other half I do penetration testing, consulting, and some research. My specialty is not really into the infrastructure per se, so I don't know much to say about specifics, especially internet security on infrastructure. But what I do see with a lot of clients that I have is that when they connect to internet, they suddenly become forced to think about a whole lot of stuff that their uplink provider, for instance, is enforcing out of them, or that I just need to think about to get some traffic through. What I do see is that internally, in internal networking in companies, this knowledge is far and far lacking. You see the strangest networks being configured internally, basically working because it's one big network anyway, but the subnetting and thinking about routing and segmentation and and switching, et cetera, is nearly null. And I think the security implications for your internal network can be huge. You can protect yourself pretty well from the outside, but all I have to do is try and get a job at your company, or clean up in the afternoon or the evening, and have every bit of information in your network available to me. So I think one of the quick fixes can be to apply all that knowledge that you're acquiring on the internet side of your network, also on the internal side of your network. It's a quick idea. It's not quickly implemented.
Okay, I'm Nicolas. I'm also working for Colt in Switzerland with Sebastian. I'm doing like 2 jobs. I'm doing some engineering, like network design, network architecture, and so on. And also, since I'm in the professional services team, dealing with customers. And the trend lately is that all the big like banks, insurance, and so on, rethink their security. And yeah, they really try to put money into and do the things nicely. And the problem I see right now is that a lot of people get information out of marketing, out of magazines, and then you see when you face a customer that what they know is not the truth. So it's sometimes not easy to tell them, well, what's written there in that magazine or in that white paper is totally wrong and misleading. That's one of the things. And the other thing is, they try to do security, but sometimes they don't stop. So they just try to secure as much as possible, and in the end, you get an environment that you cannot manage anymore. So these are the trends, basically, and the new trends, like Seb said and Efik said, is all these routing protocol attacks you can do because everything becomes so automatic, and you have no tool that's going to watch BGP, OSPF, routing tables, and so on, and tell you, hey, something is happening right now on your network. It may just happen for 10 minutes, disappear, and you may never see it again. So no traces, no accounting, nothing. So that's one of the trends I see. Fix is like train the user, train the customers, and maybe think about some new tools to do that for you automatically.
Okay. My name is Halvar. I'm a speaker at Black Hat, and that's pretty much all I do, and I study in the meantime. I have to admit that I'm kind of in a similar position as Job is. I don't know too much about the infrastructure itself. I'm coming from a software bugs perspective. But something that you can almost always see is that people will choose functionality over simplicity. So they'll choose a product which has the larger feature list and better self-configuration and so on over the product that has no features. Although that product that has no features has less potential to be abused. So generally, I think we need a paradigm shift that people try to take the simplest solution instead of taking the more, well, comfortable solution. And secondly, almost all architectures for networks are hierarchical in design, which might be good as it's easy to manage, but on the other hand, hierarchical systems have single points of failure. And single points of failure mean that an attacker can just look at that single point hard enough and figure out how to break in. Now, we all know that basically no product is ever going to be secure, and there are bugs in every piece of code, besides Hello World, perhaps. So an attacker, by just identifying that single point of failure in a hierarchical structure, just has to focus or spend enough time on that single point, and he'll eventually get in. Well, I don't see a fix.
My name is Sean Clowes. I work for a small security company in Sydney, Australia. In terms of my experience in this particular subject, at the moment I'm mostly working on systems programming, development and research, but in the past I've certainly been a network and security administrator, so I can actually speak from the front lines of this particular subject. I think that the problem with the infrastructure, there are quite a few problems with the infrastructure. One of them, I think, is that old attacks still work and are still extremely effective. The most obvious example of that being DNS poisoning. We have a situation in this world where the internet is particularly built around trust, and I take it FX talked a lot about BGP routing protocols, all that sort of stuff. And I can think of two excellent examples of failures in this trust. Just recently in Australia we had situations where some of the major ISPs had their DNS poisoned, and that led to a situation where most of the people in the country who were using these big ISPs to access their bank were actually accessing a non-existent IP address block inside China. And the entire bank site was being faked from China, and it has since been entirely denied by the bank. No information was leaked, etc., etc. But it's quite clear that all these old attacks, these ones which attempt to exploit trust relationships, continue to work in today's environment. Another example which I can think of, yeah, and I'm sure many of you guys would have read about this recently. There was a recent study about BGP routing on the internet, and how again it all becomes trust once you reach the border routers on the internet, which can do these BGP broadcasts. In their case, they found that they watched it for 3 years. They watched the routing broadcast for 3 years, and they saw that over that time, quite frequently, address blocks which had not been allocated would somehow appear in the routing tables and would exist for a day, 10 hours or something, and then disappear again. So we had the internet's base infrastructure was being exploited, and we were getting these IP addresses which simply should not have existed on the internet, existing temporarily, presumably being used to attack or something, some other site, then disappearing again.
Hi, my name is Tim Mullen, and I'm the CIO of AnchorIS.com. We are a developer of secure accounting software, tier 3, trying to get into the tier 2 business model. Insofar as my insight into infrastructure issues, I oversee a 5-state network in the U.S. with about 150 boxes at this point. Small network, but it's highly diverse and spread over the whole U.S. coast to coast. So I have a little bit of insight into the infrastructure issues. What I've typically seen, and not just inside, we try to affect it internally, but in a lot of companies, similar to what Halvar was saying, I don't see enough security in depth. I see setting up a firewall system and a DMZ, and that's that, thinking that protecting the front door protects everything inside of the facility. I don't see enough hardening done to internal systems. I think people apply patches and people secure and do host hardening on their internet-facing boxes. Well, not even that's not enough. Not enough people do that, but then they just leave their internal systems wide open. I mean, even Microsoft saw issues with that. And to me, there is no quick fix for that. What I think, what might start a quick fix is to change the mindset of the business model and how much it's going to cost to implement a particular function. And what I mean by that is, don't just cost out the box in a circuit and the couple of hours for the guy to install it. Cost out a policy of security cost out what it will take to, properly deploy it, even if it's an internal box. And yes, it's going to cost more, but those costs can be offset by hopefully a more secure product. As far as what I see in the next year, as companies start to diverge more of their communications, such as voice over IP, voice over frame relay, onto their data networks, I see an issue with quality of service and multiple vendors with products that really don't have any standard. And we're all rolling out our own methods of controlling bandwidth and controlling packet delivery for real-time media. I think in the next year to come, I'm hoping to see a little bit more of a standardization of quality of service solutions and things of that nature.
Okay, with that said, we're going to open it up to questions. Pretty much any question is valid. Remember, you can ask general questions or very specific technical questions. So with that said, what we'll do is we'll take the question from the audience and then we'll repeat the question in case somebody in the back didn't hear it. And then anybody on the panel who thinks they have some input will speak on it, and we'll move on to the next question. So with that said, do we have anybody in the audience willing to ask the first question? Or are they just going to... No, I shouldn't have said anything about the free... Well, but see, the free drinks don't start until I arrive. And see... Yeah, come on down. Okay, so does anybody have a first question? If not, I'll have to think something up here. Sir? Okay, so maybe expand on future risks and specifically talk if you have any opinions on wireless networking. Okay, anybody?
Yeah, I think, are you actually referring to next generation 3G wireless networks like GPRS, UMTS? Okay. Yeah, I will answer the first part with the 3G wireless stuff. I see one point here for especially infrastructure risk and routing attacks and all kinds of stuff you can play with routers is when it comes to packet forwarding mobile phones or forwarding mobile devices such as GPRS mobiles or UMTS mobiles later on. Because basically the companies running these networks are phone providers. They're running mobile networks. And they're used to, as the old phone companies were used to connection-based thinking, and were just screwed when it came to packet forwarding networks. The same will happen to the mobile phone providers, and they have the core protocols and everything is working based on packets, and they actually have the networks in place right now. You can, in Europe, have GPRS phones right now and use them, but we actually saw in the provider space that they have really no clue how these networks work internally as well as to the device. So you actually have things like tunneling protocols that again are not encrypted and again use not connection-based transport mechanisms, namely UDP, that run from one provider to another and transport very interesting data, including your GSM information, including mobile VPN information. And I don't think there is a quick fix in the future, and I don't think that companies that run these networks are actually capable of protecting them correctly. So that would be the part on the mobile phones. And I think I just pass it on to someone who knows what it is.
Well, to make a nice change, won't talk about mobile phones, but about the wireless LANs. Because I see an interesting connection there to the internal networks again. I think wireless LAN networks are a very huge risk that is underestimated. And one of the big risks with it is not so much how you connect it, but the fact that it's wireless and it's invisible. Why is computer security harder than physical security? Because it's harder to see, it's harder to understand. And wireless is another step beyond that. You can have a network in your front garden and you have no idea it's there. You walk with your mobile laptop through an area and you're switching to another network and people can connect to your box without you knowing. So the whole perception of the security risks that you run are very deep and muddy and fuzzy. And then is the part where do you connect your wireless network. And of course, what I pointed out is the internal state of affairs of internal networks is terrible. Security is non-existent. So if you put your wireless cards in there, well, you can guess what happens. The fact is, if you want to securely deploy wireless networking, you have to do it like it's a part of the internet. So it is out behind the firewall, and then still you have the problem that all the individual users on that LAN are individually susceptible to attack. So you have also to protect all the individual users that are using your wireless network with personal firewall software kinds of solutions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's a very big problem that's going to take a whole lot of work and time and cost to solve.
I just have to completely concur with that opinion about wireless networking. In fact, I think it's an even larger issue than that. With a lot of new devices these days, they have wireless networking of multiple forms built in. You have IR, Bluetooth, 802.11b, coming up 802.11a. It basically, it seems every embedded device which is created these days has some sort of wireless add-on, or it comes with built-in wireless networking. And that makes it much more difficult to understand truly the implications of taking your device somewhere, and you don't end up with bastion hosts anymore. If I'm carrying around my laptop in my bag, previously I always knew it was not connected to anything, it wasn't plugged into anything, it was fine. Now, I can't necessarily make that assumption, and I always have to be cautious and be thinking about, okay, have I really secured my box? Is somebody Bluetooth connecting to it at the moment? Okay, I'm in an IR-enabled environment. Is my IR port doing something when I don't even realize it is? 802.11, all that sort of stuff, and it just all of a sudden this security risk is built into the fabric, and we have to be much more perseverant to realize the risks involved.
There's a funny story I heard out at Microsoft main campus in Redmond, Washington. I don't know if you've ever been to Microsoft main campus, but they take security fairly seriously out there. And they even have their main campus buildings, the windows are filmed, have a sheet film that attenuates RF signals to prevent remote electronic monitoring of their computer screens, or VANEC monitoring. And they position their parking structures far enough away that for you to do successful VANEC monitoring, you would have to be parked basically in their front steps. But if you go to the 148th Street bus stop and turn on your laptop, you can browse Microsoft main campus network because you're within their wireless network range. Now they know this, they just don't care. So you have this, like you were saying, a vast separation. I mean, if you just wanted to park at that bus stop all day long, you could do all kinds of neat stuff, and you never have to even get inside those hardened buildings. So.
They're encrypting the stuff they don't want to.
Yeah, it's all with that NTLM security. Yeah.
I drove around the entire facility with my laptop sniffing as much as I could.
And
sitting outside David LeBlanc's window.
David LeBlanc's window with the sniffer. Yeah. Okay, next question. Come on, sir. Better than nothing, but we'll see.
That better than nothing is a dangerous phrase in that case, because it implies that if you add complexity, it's better than less complexity. And if you don't trust the guy writing your web server to write secure code, do you trust the guy writing the personal firewall? I don't. And I wouldn't put anything on my network that tries to catch data from the network and display it in a window, because almost all programmers use a standard printf for generating that message. And I've seen too many systems being ironically hacked, not through standard vulnerable daemons, but through the IDS. And well, if you add complexity, it'll come back to haunt you. And if I've seen networks which had fairly secure daemons, well patched up, recent versions, no known bugs, and then people walked in there through a bug in the IDS, through an overflow in somewhere in the proxy that was parsing as an application firewall, and so on. So if you add security by adding complexity, you'll get screwed.
So what's the solution? Any solution?
Downgrade. Well, yes, this is not the solution that anybody would like to hear, because we all love functionality and so on, but seriously, you don't need your laptop to be like IR enabled all the time. I don't even have the driver installed. It's on my hardware somewhere. If I need it, I can load it, and I unload it explicitly afterwards. And this is not like being overly paranoid. This is just common precaution one should take. Always run the minimum amount of code you want, like you can have. The fewer code there is, the fewer bugs there are.
For personal firewalls, I see a privacy concern. I haven't had a look recently, but we saw once that we installed Zone Alarm on our laptops to see what you can do with it. And each time this nice personal firewall gets like a packet it shouldn't see, you have a nice pop-up and say, do you want more information about that IP address and thing? And then you have a nice link to their website. And looking at it, that means that in the URL, you have all the things you just got, like source IP address, destination, ports, payload, and so on. That means that they can gather a lot of information that your personal firewall receives.
Does it go out unencrypted?
I don't know, but probably yes.
Good.
So in fact, by running a personal firewall, you're giving out a lot of information to a company you don't have any trust in. So this is something I would take into account too before running personal firewall.
I just wanted to make a bit of a tenuous link there, but I actually think personal firewall software is really important. It may be adding complexity, but I think it's really important because it allows you to have a much finer control over what goes in and out of your box. And personally, I believe that things which run on the host will always be more powerful than things which run on the network. For example, network IDS versus host IDS, etc. But the tenuous link I wanted to make there was was vaguely related to infrastructure when we talk about VPNs, and everyone's really big on VPNs and encrypted VPNs at the moment. You know, 1024-bit awesome encryption over this VPN link, and that is really completely useless when the CEO has this VPN which he insisted that he wants to be able to use from his laptop and be able to access everything, except that his machine is completely wide open. It's running Windows 98. And so his machine becomes this incredible conduit into the internals of some incredibly large Fortune 500 company.
You already talked. Just a very short hint on those VPNs. I don't know anybody who's ever audited VPN code.
You love cryptic clues.
As far, you asked what the fix was. One, I think there's an issue with the default configurations of a lot of the software we purchase. And you throw Windows 98 or ME up on the internet with file sharing and everything turned on, and you run the wizards, and people play without knowing really what they're doing. In those instances, I suppose having a personal firewall will help mitigate some of those security issues. But I think we as users of the software, if you're going to install a personal firewall, I think you need to take the time to learn to configure it properly. If you're going to install software on a unit that you're going to have pointed to the internet, you need to take some responsibility for making sure that it's secured properly and that you learn what you're doing. I think education is probably the solution for most of the problems that we have in the security arena. Too often, I think we all point the finger at, well, this is the default configuration and they're stupid, so it's their fault, but we're the ones who put it up on the internet. I mean, we take responsibility for learning how to drive when we purchase a car. I think we should take responsibility for learning how to secure the software we purchase when we install it on our systems.
Okay, I want to ask a question now because I thought of something. I'm wondering if Cisco is still the product of choice for your infrastructure, or your routing infrastructure, from a security standpoint, and if it's not, what's the product that is? And if Cisco is the product, which version of iOS? Because historically, different versions of iOS have all kinds of different weird, tweaky bugs. So, you know, you're building your own network. What do you buy, and what version do you use?
Okay, going back to the products first. If you have a high bandwidth network, the only real product you can use would be Cisco devices or Juniper, basically speaking. For some dedicated kind of application like DSL or like ADSL or cable modem aggregation, you can go for other products like Unisphere, Redback, and so on. Switches, if you take good switches, you can go for Cisco or for Extreme Next Networks, and or for Foundry. That's the kind of products you can take. Basically, all the big telcos and ISPs are running on Cisco. Some of them are trying to move to Juniper, but not a lot of them. As far as I know, you have to be a really big customer to get good support from Juniper. This is one of the reasons some ISPs don't go for Juniper right now, and the cost. But the cost difference is not that big. So most of the providers have Cisco Power Network. For the iOS release, well, it depends if you're a provider, a home user, or an enterprise. If you're a provider, like I said in the presentation, you have this service provider release, and the latest that has SSH and all these things is 12.0.19s. That's one of the good ones. And then for the normal IP plus feature set, it's probably 12.1.7. That is okay. I can't remember. But what you can do is just take the latest Cisco advisory. It's about holes in the ACLs on GSRs, and you have like all the latest release that are recommended. So probably 12.0.15 or 12.1.7, something around this. 12.1.9, okay, 12.1.9. But the problem is with Cisco, it's not just like with Microsoft say, okay, you have one service pack and you have hotfixes. With Cisco, you have 20 or 25 different kind of feature sets, trains, releases, maintenance, large deployment, restricted deployment, early deployment releases. So it's, if you take the ISP lists, it's always a big question, what are you running? And you have 20 people with different opinions. So that's one more.
Just a few more words. If you only have a specific need for network, like you need a switch for your office, or you need one router for your internet connection, you have a broad range of vendors on the market. One problem you reach is when you have a lot of needs, and either you take the best, or what you think is the best vendor on the market for each application, or for each equipment, but you will end with 10 different vendors, and I don't know any people that will be able to handle or operate all those equipments. So at the end, nearly the only vendor that provides all the network services is Cisco on the market. And if you want to provide all those services, you have to go for Cisco. You can make exceptions, it's what we are doing, but basically you always stick to Cisco.
Okay.
It depends what you want to do. Yeah, for our office network, for Exchange and all the nice things the employee wants, yeah, I think Microsoft has not so many competitors. Now for other applications like our web server or our management network, we have no Microsoft product, of course. So it always depends what you want to do, but the more equipment or different vendor you will have, the more you will add in complexity in your network, and the more knowledge you will need. And if I always said, if when you choose two equipments or two software, always take or try to stick to the one you know the best, because you have a better chance to configure it properly. And yeah.
Quick question, anybody in the room running a network with more than 10 routers or 10 switches, or a mix of it, running something different than Cisco devices? Okay, what are you running? Alcatel. For DSL or for ATM? Okay, so an IP network. Yeah? Sorry? Full foundry. Okay.
How many, to get some comparison, how many people in the room are running networks with 10 routers or more that are Cisco?
Yeah, Cisco have good devices, Juniper 2, Foundry, and Extreme. These are the four big players. But Cisco is still the biggest market share, but yeah, Foundry are good products too. Okay, just FX going to respond.
Yeah, for Lucent devices, I was about to say something about it because he said correctly there are only 4 real big players in the game, and I saw devices that were actually developed by a small company, which then got brought by Lucent, that would be my first choice for a secure router, and I was really impressed because they combined like most features I wouldn't expect, starting from a real cool shell that is actually TCL scripting capable and can do a lot of tasks for you, including lots of security and including stuff like virtual routers if you really need that kind of stuff. These devices were called Zelia routers, and they got brought by Lucent, as many other companies. And we have an unfortunate development if companies get brought by bigger companies, and no matter who's the buyer and who's the one who gets brought, the development is going down the pan. So if you have really a company with that do some innovative device design in routing, switching technology, it has a very bad chance to survive. And as soon as the company gets taken over, the lead developers will leave the house, sooner or later.
Just from stock options.
Yeah, I don't know why, but probably because they started with a small company to actually do some innovative stuff, and as soon as they got taken over by some biggie, they are hit by politics and whatever, so they leave. And this actually happened for the real good Aston developers as well as for the real good Zelia developers. So I wouldn't actually build a network with Zelia routers right now because I wouldn't be sure if I get support in like 2 years. But from technology point of view, if someone can grab such a thing and spend like a week in a lab with it, I really recommend it. It's a cool device.
The last one just about Lucent. Can I? Okay, just Lucent has a cool I've been told a cool firewall called the Brick, if I remember correctly, that's running on a OS called Inferno. Did anybody have a look at it? Yeah, except FX. No, okay. Then I'm going to talk with him.
It really depends who you're trying to stop. If you're trying to stop the 80% or 90% of the bell curve, the script kiddies, then IDSs, I think you can pick almost any of them. I like Snort, although the code is incredibly messy. But if you want to stop skilled attackers, and if you are protecting anything of value, you have to assume that the skilled attacker will invest about as much money as he expects to get out of there into breaking into something, then the principle I stated for personal firewalls will apply to IDSs as well. Make sure the IDS code is really rock solid. And Snort is not rock solid. I mean, Marty is saying that the code will not be cleaned up because cleaned up code can be easily stolen. And for other IDSs, the code is messy because it's closed source development practices where they are shipping a product without having it debugged. So you're stopping the kiddies running pre-compiled scripts and exploits. You stop 80%, but you're opening yourself up for the those who are willing to invest, I don't know, $100,000 to get into your network.
So just general comment about IDS is one we already thought about with Seb and all this fighting is when we have some customers coming that want to do some hosting, housing, or so on. So at the end, it's always, oh yeah, could you also just put an IDS in front or behind the firewall to see if somebody is trying to break in? What's the point of doing that if you get 10,000 alarms a day and nobody watches these alarms or really gets after it and say, okay, that one, it's false positive, false negative, did we catch it, did we not catch it? It's like running tripwire on your hosts. You install tripwire, but nobody checks the output, so it's a cool tool, but it's probably, if you do it and put it there and just don't watch, it's a big false sense of security, in my opinion.
Okay, so if you had to choose between the market leader ISS and Marty's snort, and it was going to protect your secrets, what would you pick? Anybody here would pick ISS? Would anybody pick snort? Is the alternative?
Yeah.
So yeah, market share is not an indicator. Unlike in Cisco, where the Cisco is the market leader is the indicator. I think in ISS it's not the indicator.
Yeah, do you really get support with ISS?
There's a commercial. Isn't Marty having a commercial group to provide support?
As far as I know, Marty started a company called Saucefire, and they are developing a tool called Open Sensor, Open Snort, something like that, and you get a nice GUI a la ISS and so on, so you will get support from them directly. But yeah, the problem is if you're supporting as an ISP or telco such an equipment and service, you cannot do it because you need a team of 20 or 30 security experts. Then you're not a telco or an ISP anymore, you're a managed security provider. And that's probably not the core business of a telco or an ISP.
Would that be legal? Would it be legal to look into their boxes?
Yeah, it's a company probably, but
I've heard mixed things about the company, and I've heard nothing about the technology.
well, only thing I know is the name of the company is that they can like sustain 1 gig of traffic and still get like 99% of good signature whatsoever. So I've never seen it at any customer. Usually what the customer picks is ISS. When he thinks IDS, he thinks ISS to speak about products and market shares. So like firewall equals checkpoints or picks now. Yeah, probably Snort. I've never seen any NFR running.
Have you seen NFR?
Never. At the customer side, never. And same for Dragon IDS. Never saw any Dragon IDS in Europe. The IDS stuff. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. As far as I know, the Cisco IDS is running on a blade, and you can put the blade in the 16.509, this big multi-layer switch. And they had the same problems as other IDSs with this person U decode things, Unicode things, so I don't think they use another approach, like still signature based. I don't know how good they are or how bad. The only good thing they say is they can keep up the traffic quite easily because everything is ASIC based. But same for the other products. Never saw any device running except in a lab. So.
Would you have rather taken the budget that was spent on those boxes and put it toward training your employees?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention something about quick about this integrated IDS, because I agree here that complexity is an issue. And when I read the white paper, I never touched these boxes, but the white paper says, well, this IDS is great because it can listen to signatures on all VLANs at once. And I was thinking, IDS is a pretty complex piece of software. So if I like exploit this integrated IDS, does it mean I get all the VLANs at once? Yeah, it's the ideal point to take over the network and nobody will notice.
Well, and there have been buffer overflows in what ISS, NFR, almost every IDS. They've found. Sir? Outsourced security solutions.
Well, I can't say much about effectiveness from experience. What I do see is that I think it can be a viable basis to choose to put it outside your company, but I doubt that most are able to judge all the risks that are, involved with it, because you're letting other people also in your network, or you're even more sending out data of your network. But it could well be that in the end, the calculation of all the risks and the cost and the effectiveness of the people actually doing it come in favor of doing it externally, because as we see, the amount of experience and the way you organize IDS monitoring is so complex and so difficult to do, and especially if you do it from ground up in-house, that I can see that it might be interesting to do it outside of your company. But again, it's hard to judge when you are going to give your secrets to an outside company.
Yeah, the thing is, what you don't know with a company like Counterpane or what ISS is doing, because they have the same kind of services, what kind of tool do they have behind to correlate all the information they get from you? That's one of the points. And the other one is that you have to really trust these companies, because it just don't get your IDS logs, they get the firewall logs, they have agents running on the systems. So can you trust the company? Can you trust the people working there? It's like always watching the watchman sometimes. So good side, bad sides. Outsourcing is always a big question, especially if you have big secrets, for sure.
There's, I was talking to a risk manager, and they were saying, on the outsourced security, they were saying, so let's say you go with Counterpane and you're General Motors, and then Counterpane signs up Chrysler, and then they sign up Mercedes-Benz. Now you have Counterpane with access to all the competitors' information. And so you might actually be increasing your exposure and your risks. And so the risk managers usually go crazy in those situations. The other one I saw, I was talking to a customer of Counterpane, and this is true, I'm not making it up, so I can't be sued. And they said, yeah, sure, we pay the $10,000 a month to get the Counterpane logo on our website, but it really doesn't matter. I mean, it doesn't do anything for us. We just pay the money to get the logo because our customers think it means something. So it was more of a public perception issue to them. They didn't think it was an actual increase in their security. Sort of like getting that ICSA certification stamped on your firewall. It means nothing except to the guy that's in charge of, the CIO who doesn't know better. So, sir? Yeah, how often are they willing to wake you up in the middle of the night? Yeah. Anybody have a comment on that, or next question?
There's one other side to it, and that's insurance. And what I understand, but I haven't looked at it into it at all. Counterpane was doing something with insurances. And because that's a problem, how effective are they? How good are they? What do they find, and how do they bring that into their deal with you? You know, do they take the blame and take the cost if something goes wrong that they should have found or something like that? And how is insurance tied to that? Because in the end, you're interested in the risks, and if it is covered one way or the other, that might be okay for you.
We only have time for about one more question until drinkies.
I don't see any.
Is that an infrastructure issue, I guess?
Sure.
I guess we can talk about that. Well, so expand the question to also include how often you update the flash code on all your...
Well, I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
you can secure the boxes, and you can roll out, and the administrators absolutely can apply these fixes. They just typically don't. I've actually been there. I know how hard it is sometimes to roll these fixes out, and you have to test them, and you don't necessarily want to trust the latest hotfix from Microsoft in case they've forgotten to sign something and it hoses up your machine. So I also think that Microsoft doesn't necessarily make it easy for us right now. Hotfix management is a serious issue, particularly the way that they give us the hotfixes. They're still rolled out as standard EXEs. An MSI-based installation package can be rolled out via group policy with a single click, basically. You can keep X number of servers in an organizational unit with Active Directory and throw the MSI package right into the software hive, and next time that box starts up or somebody logs on, you can have it pushed down to it. You can also force reboots. There's a number of different ways to manage your Windows infrastructure. Now, in regard to other infrastructures with Linux, and I mean, I use it a little bit, but I'm certainly not an authority on the subject. But there are several tools, even native to Windows. WMI allows you to roll out patches. You can roll your own Perl scripts. There are certainly a number of things that you can do. I just think that people don't take the time to do it. Now, I will comment on the current model really requires the administrator to have some programming skills, I think. So if the administrator doesn't have programming skills, you need to hook up your administrator with the developers, talk about what the WMI objects are, what can be done with that. You need to talk to your administrators about group policy and what can be done with that and how you're going to roll out these fixes and things of that nature. I have to say it still comes down to us. We've put the boxes in. If we don't install the hot fixes, regardless of how hard it's going to be, it's something we know we're going to have to do. And if we don't do it, as we've seen, NIMDA in Code Red, even a proper configuration would have stopped those. But even a year later, people haven't installed the hot fixes for NIMDA or the roll-up package, and they still get infected. So I don't know if it's so much an issue of the technical difficulties of rolling them out, even in a wide infrastructure. I just think that the concern isn't there.
How many of these auto-update features for your firewall, antivirus, patches, do you think are still susceptible to DNS cache exploits?
Well, I mean, if they're basing it off of a DNS entry, they all are. I mean,
FX just wrote one.
you probably didn't see it, but we were actually asking ourselves the same question when I switched on one of these Windows PCs and it said, Norton Antivirus, I would like to talk to my daddy. So I thought, yeah, let's look what it does and see if you have like one DNS poisoning or you just take over the DNS server or you supply another DNS server via DHCP or whatever comes in your mind. You can make it talk to any place in the world you want to. And with the later versions, which is namely 1.4, which is widely used in big companies, despite the fact that Symantec stated it's not, you can actually supply any kind of file, roll it together in a zip and say, please start it, which means that you use Norton Antivirus Live Update to rapidly deploy your worm. They actually refused and said this is not going to work, and the 1.6 version actually uses signatures and everything is fine. Well, it uses signatures, but first of all, it doesn't apply the signature to the main database file that says you need a virus update. So you can supply the old data file all the time, and it doesn't update your virus software at all. And secondly, I was wondering why even Microsoft was bright enough to use HTTPS, means HTTP over SSL, to actually authenticate the server it's talking to, and even in the latest version, Symantec didn't have a clue what this is for. So that's my experience with this.
One thing I'd just like to do is to twist the question a little bit and ask you, okay, so you realize that the updates or whatever, what do you update? It's getting harder and harder to realize what you actually need to update. All of this stuff we install on our networks these days, it's all this incredibly complex embedded software. I mean, I'm not sure whether any of you guys, I mean, if you get a home network these days, you can go to a local little computer store supplier and they'll supply you with a NATing router, which will do NAT for you. Now, what that actually has is it's running an extremely old version of Linux on it with an extremely old web server running extremely old everything, and it is completely vulnerable to everything. So fair enough, if you eventually realize this, okay, I'm running this incredibly old, vulnerable thing on the internet, how do I fix it? You know, how do I patch something when I don't even, when I'm not even meant to know that this is the operating system it's running and that it's vulnerable to all these incredible holes? And the only reason half of this stuff isn't being widely exploited is because it's generally running on obscure architectures. But that's no real barrier to exploitation. You know, if it's running on ARM, who cares? It can still be exploited. So we really have to be much more careful when we say, okay, well, we need to patch everything. It's okay if you patch 50 of your workstations and 50 of your servers. What about if it's your printers which start attacking you?
I think that's going to be it. Let's give a round of applause to the panelists. And I'm sure you'll be able to corner them and buy them a beer.
After the free drink.